Well, welcome. Welcome to to Lily and Christine on Facebook Live.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Hopefully I have it here as well. Okay. We love doing these, but obviously we're still not quite as professional with them as we would like to be. And it is a while, of course. It's a month since we've done one. And today we're going to focus on, are we stuck at the cross? Do we spend more time thinking about the death of Jesus than we do about the life of Jesus, and also about the life of the kingdom? So anyway, welcome, Lily. And I was just admiring what I think of as a sign of the kingdom that Lily has their beautiful Monsterio in the background. So thank you for that, Lily.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks to my son who taught me about replanting them. So we're multiplying. I just need new pots. So that's a good metaphor for the kingdom, is we need new pots, bigger pots to expand the kingdom. So those are good metaphors, especially as we pass the first day of spring on Sunday. So at least in the northern hemisphere, western hemisphere, whatever we're in, America. Exactly. You have to help me with hemispheres. I don't know hemispheres.
Oh, I think that we're in the northern hemisphere.
All right,
I hope
good.
we're in the northern hemisphere. If we're not in the northern hemisphere, then something strange has happened. And,
well, in the world we're living in, anything is possible. So you never know.
True. This is true.
You never know.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is that I really get frustrated about the amount of emphasis that there is on the cross and the death of Jesus, and so much less time seems to be spent talking about the life of Jesus and the wonderful things that he did, because we're meant to follow the life of Jesus and how he lived rather than the death. And then also I think we spend too little time thinking about what Lent was really preparing us for, which from my perspective is life of the new kingdom, life of the eternal kingdom of God that Jesus was ushering in through his death and resurrection. So that's why we wanted to talk about this today. And I can get quite passionate about this. I think actually both of us can, can't we, Lily?
I think so, yes. I don't like it so having worked on big church staffs, like big mega church kind of staffs, as well as Episcopal church staff, so much more traditional, is that we get into the Easter celebration. Like when I've worked for a big mega church, it was like we built everything up to the big Easter celebration services that weekend. And the church I was a part of, we had Saturday night and Sunday night, so it was like a lot of church. But then as soon as the Easter service was over, everybody like crashed, and there was no like, okay, so now what? Now what do we do with Easter? And then in the Episcopal church, we would call the Sunday after Easter is like low Sunday, because people don't show up because they've just experienced all of Holy Week and they've just done church a lot. So it's always called, quote, low Sunday.
Did you know it's also called Holy Humor Sunday?
No, oh no, you taught me that, but I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, but to be honest, I haven't seen a great deal of humor associated with that day either. And you'd think we should have a lot of humor, a lot of fun.
But it should be joyful. It should be continuing the joy of the fact that Jesus isn't dead and that we don't have to be dead. And I was looking back, I told Christine this morning, I looked back and found a blog post from 2019 on, hey, it's still Easter, because in the church calendar, it's Easter tide. As soon as Easter happens, Easter Sunday, we get 50 days to celebrate the Easter season and remember and go, okay, what happened next? And then how do we live in that resurrection? And the people that I know who work on church staffs, whatever flavor of church, they're always exhausted and didn't get to celebrate Easter, really. They just did all the work so everybody else could celebrate, and go into the story of Holy Week and Easter itself. So it's like, okay, how do we keep living into the resurrection and not just get stuck, like you said, at the cross. And then today, I looked at the calendar, and June 5th this year is when Pentecost Sunday happens. So that's when we celebrate the Holy Spirit coming, and that's when Eastertide ends and the season of Pentecost begins. So we've got that 50 days post Easter Sunday that I think we live out the resurrection every day post, whatever day it is, and live in Easter. We are Easter people. So how are we living as Easter people every day?
Exactly. Yes. I think this is, to me, this is the key. To me, the cross was really just a tool, a means to an end. It was something that ushered in the kingdom, and we've made it, at least in many traditional churches, it's become very much a focus of what goes on. And I know Lent ends, with the day before Good Friday, but even so, it's not really preparing us for Friday. It's meant to be preparing us for Easter Sunday and the season of celebration of the kingdom that follows. And I think that what it's supposed to be, one of the ways, to me, it's supposed to be preparing us is for helping us to examine our lives to see how much do our lives attune to the life of Jesus. How much are we really following the ways of Jesus? The justice, the compassion, and even the joy of Jesus. And, using that to prepare us for God's wonderful shalom kingdom. I think those of you that know me know that I spend quite a bit of time talking about shalom and the principle of wholeness and health and everything that God is preparing us for. And I think that, this is the essence of the world to come that we are supposed to be living out as Easter people, as Lily so rightly pointed out that we are. So,
well, I was thinking of that old phrase or quote that, people can be so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And that we can get stuck, at least the growing up that I did in church, what was about, we get saved, quote, so we can go to heaven when we die. But then nobody taught me how, till much later, how do we live? What are we supposed to do between now and then? We got a lot of time between if you accept Jesus when you're 11, like I did, and then you got a long time. How do we live it out? And it was years before, when I actually started teaching through the Gospels verse by verse, that I realized, oh, am I really a follower of Jesus or not? Because I wasn't really doing the things that Jesus did, because I had spent so much of my life or at least my church life or my devotional life in kind of the epistles, that I didn't see the rich life of Jesus. I didn't really see how was Jesus living while he was here, and then how did he invite us to live as we are people of him, as we are his followers. What does that mean? And a lot of it is about living out justice and living for the people on the margins. And, I wasn't going to visit people in prison or even writing letters to anyone in prison. I wasn't doing a lot of things that Jesus did. And so it really was kind of a mind shift for me, and a reimagining of what does it really mean to follow Jesus and be a person of resurrection and a person of shalom, bringing peace where we go, peacemakers, because that's the Sermon on the Mount is blessed are the peacemakers. How are we going to live? How are we living that way? And it's so much needed in our world today to be kingdom people and people who bring the shalom of God and the compassion of Jesus. And I'm not sure that a lot of people outside of church see people who are followers of Jesus or the word Christian as of someone who embraces or embodies compassion, sadly. Right now.
Oh yeah. I know you've got a book you want to share about.
Yeah, well, I just started it, Christine. So this is one of those books where Joyce Rupp is one of my heroes, and this is Boundless Compassion, and it actually has a workbook to go with it. But she is talking about how do we put compassion in our life. And I took a course on compassion in 2014. And it was out of a seminary, but also out of Stanford. And they talked about how people didn't put Christianity and compassion together. They saw that kind of like as a Buddhist practice,
Wow.
but not as a Christian practice.
That is horrifying.
And isn't that scary? That is very scary to me as a follower of Jesus, because the compassion of Jesus, I mean, he had compassion not when he rides into Jerusalem on the donkey on Palm Sunday. It's like he wept because he had compassion on the people. And when he gets interrupted, this has always bothered me, that when he was going to take his disciples on retreat after all the stuff that had just happened, and they go across on the boat and they get out and there's this whole crowd who's met him. And instead of saying, hey, we're getting ready to go on retreat, guys, we'll come back and talk to you later, he had compassion on them because they were sheep without a shepherd. And so in her book, so this is just like the first, she's so rich. This is week 1, day 2 is what she invites you to do. She says, I asked the group to consider the seeds as symbols. So I went out and got some new seeds this week. Not time to plant here yet, but she said there are 4 main spiritual qualities necessary for compassion's growth: non-judgment, non-violence, forgiveness, and mindfulness.
Wow.
And those 4 are so, to me, symbolic of who Jesus is and was and how he lived his life. And John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who died in the last couple of years, he was such about nonviolence and compassion. And sadly, I didn't know a ton about him before he died. I mean, I learned about him kind of the last part of his life, even though he went to school here in Nashville, and I was a part of the civil rights movement here in Nashville. But I so want to be more like Jesus, and like John Lewis, because he was so much about this compassion practice. And she invites us to like get some seeds and label them like with these 4 things, and then kind of pray with them every day. Sit with them okay,
I love that.
Sit with non-judgment or sit with non-violence. And she even said, whatever would be the symbol for you. Like I imagine Christine painting rocks that looked like seeds, more like the shape of seeds, and then putting those words on them and praying with those. That's what I imagined that you would do with it. And I was going to draw some, and then I just thought, I'll just go buy some seed packets and do it with seed packets.
Well, and at the moment, I notice you've got, they look like, are they sunflowers or is
this one is this? I love zinnias. So these are zinnia.
Wow.
But they have a zinnia. I don't know what gift zinnias are,
thinking, but imagine planting sunflowers and praying with them over in that kind of a way. I think it would be a lovely practice. Let me go back to something you said earlier, though. You mentioned about how we lived too much in the epistles. And I think it's true. Now this is not so much true, like we go to an Episcopal church too. And part of what I love about the Episcopal church is that every week we read a gospel portion. And usually the sermon is preached out of that gospel portion. Not always, but usually. And I love that because it does connect you to the life of Jesus. I think it's one of the reasons that Episcopal churches traditionally, are more into justice and kind of the actions of the gospel, is because they've had so much of their lives has been steeped in the gospels. And a lot of other churches, other denominations, they spend most of their time in the epistles, or some of them in the Old Testament even.
Which I love the Old Testament, but yes, that's true. And you can't, you don't know, who are we supposed to live like? We're supposed to be followers.
We're not to live like Paul, though he's got a lot of good stuff to say, but we're supposed to live like Jesus. And if we don't steep ourselves in the life of Jesus and of what he has to say for us in terms of how to live, that's why I say we get stuck at the cross. Because we have that focus about the only thing a lot of people seem to know about Jesus is that he was crucified.
Right.
Some of them aren't even sure that he was resurrected again, but they know he was crucified, and that's kind of the main thing that they seem to focus on. And even the resurrection, but, to me, it's the life of the kingdom, because the life of the kingdom is to be lived here on earth. It's not just for heaven, it's for earth. The Shalom kingdom is something, and that was why the early disciples gave up their homes. They sold their properties. Some of them would put their lives at risk in order to reach out and to help people who were sick or, who were being unjustly treated. This was part of why I think Christianity was so, in its early stages, was so scary to the kingdom of Rome, and to kingdoms that followed it. And I think it was Constantine that started to water down what this was all about. And we're not going to get into that today.
That would be another good topic.
But it's in those early days, in a way, it was a very threatening religion, not because of what it preached so much as because of what it did.
How they lived.
And how they lived out the life of Jesus, and this amazing life that was so much in contradistinction to a kingdom, an empire kingdom, where there was this hierarchical kind of kingdom where the people at the top got everything and the people at the bottom got nothing, and I know so many people kind of have let me just say, I should have said that if you want to make a comment, you can say it in the Facebook. I've got my Facebook open here on my iPhone, so that if you want to make a comment or even ask a question, we may not get to them, but put it in the comments on the Facebook page, and we will look at that hopefully later in this. So this goes, the very half hour that we do this for goes very quickly. But yeah, I mean, the life of the kingdom is something that we are meant to be living out, and that's what the early disciples did. And I think, to me, and I know some people will be horrified by my saying this, Christianity looks more like sanctified communism than like sanctified capitalism, because I don't think that those early Christians were capitalists at all. They didn't go after getting more money, more property, more of this. They were generous. They shared. They gave. They looked out for the person around them. They tried to make sure that everybody was provided for. And that is something that I think we have lost in our way of looking at Christianity.
I was thinking about the people who've been opening their homes in Poland and other places, and the fact that the Polish people came and brought strollers. I think it was in Poland, where they brought strollers for the people who were getting off the trains who had
wasn't
kids.
It lovely? I just cried when I read that. Yeah.
And that on Airbnb, they're allowing people to pay for people to stay in Airbnbs in different countries. So you can pay into, so you're providing the space for people to, which is such a generous thing. I mean, it's, are we willing to open
it's not generous on the part of Airbnb.
No, they're allowing, somehow they're allowing, it's at least encouraging. For me, it was like, they're encouraging people to share versus hoard. And that it makes me also think, I don't have it right in front of me, but Lisa and Mark Scandrette have a book called The Ninefold Path, and the Ninefold Path of Jesus, which is how do we live out the Beatitudes. And Mark Scandrette realized that he had a friend who was, I think he was Buddhist, who said, so what do you do as a Christian? What do you do? And all Mark could think of off the top of his head was, well, we pray and accept Jesus, and then we read the Bible. And he didn't really have any practices of how he lived out his faith every day, and in a way that made sense to life for him anyway. So he started practicing, how do we live out? What if the Beatitudes wasn't a nice sermon? What if it was really, truly Jesus's blueprint of how we live out the kingdom? And what would that look like in the 2000s, living in 2020, wherever we live? What does it look like to live out the kingdom in our neighborhood? And that's one of the things when we bought our new house where I'm sitting now, we've said, how do we love our neighbors? How do we move? We're going to move into the neighborhood and learn how to love our neighbors. And what does that look like? And that means you have to actually get to know who lives next door. And even when they're a little crazy, or even when they don't look like you or whatever, it's how do we love those people? And what do they need? And how can I help them? Even if it's just praying for them, if I don't know everything. And so that's become a practice. And it's been really fun to get to know. We have a very diverse neighborhood, which was intentionally we moved here versus somewhere else, so we could learn more about other people and other cultures, and other parts of town. And that's been really great. And I feel like there's lots more to do. I was praying yesterday when I was walking the dog, because there are a lot of new people in the neighborhood, and because it's been COVID, I haven't been knocking on doors delivering cookies like I have done in years past. I have just been praying. So, but I'd really like to know, now that it's getting nicer, I try to introduce myself when I see somebody new, but to get out there more and go, what's happening in the neighborhood? And
walking the dog is a great way to get to meet people. Or gardening, and being in the front yard. Now, our front yard, unfortunately, is kind of way up here, but if we're down tending our fruit trees, which are in the parking strip, then that, is a better way to meet people. And we have met people, and talk to them as a result of that.
And you give away a lot of your fruit and a lot of your tomatoes, right? Right on the front.
Yeah, we do. We sell some of them, but we also give some away. And yes, it's a great way to reach out in the neighborhood. It really is. Or to reach out to other groups. I mean, we'd given an invitation to a church to come and pick some of the apples. And for some reason, there was nobody else available, but the person that was kind of organizing it, she is the campus person, and she met 3 Japanese people that had just arrived in the country, and she asked them to come, and they came, and they absolutely loved it. They picked apples with us, and then we actually had morning tea or coffee and chocolate zucchini bread. I think they liked that even more than the picking of the apples.
Well, hospitality, I mean, that to me, that is one of the practices that I have missed most during COVID, is the practice of hospitality. And you and I have talked about that, is that to me, hospitality is the 21st century evangelism. And it's how Jesus lived. He met people around the table, because that was part of their cultural practice, is inviting people in to eat, and sitting, and who you sat with around the table always got him in trouble. But that's what we need to do more of, is that, to me, the kingdom happens around our tables, picnic tables, or outside if we're not ready to have some people over yet, or inside too. But that's a practice that I'm looking forward to as things are opening up again to do more of.
Oh, me too. And we've had some delightful experiences because of inviting people into our home, that most people would say, you invited them into your home? Or, we had 2 young guys one time kind of knocked on our door and said, can we sleep in your backyard? Because they'd read that we were an intentional community, and they were wanting to go up to Canada and hadn't been able to get across the border, because where they were going to get a small stipend, and that wasn't allowed. And we said, well, you can't sleep in our backyard, but one of our apartments is open at the moment. Do you want to come down, spend a few days there? So they did, and then they actually managed to get up to Canada, but only for a couple of weeks. So they came back, and they actually ended up spending a year with us, sleeping in a tiny tower room that we have that's normally a prayer room. Unfortunately, we lost our prayer room. We thought it would only be for a short time, but it turned out for a year. Lovely young men. And unfortunately, we've kind of lost contact with them. One of them actually is in Nashville now.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. But we've met some wonderful people like that through those kinds of reaching out experiences that most people would say, did you actually do that?
Well, it is. It's learning. It's learning that you don't have to be afraid. Everybody has dignity. The person who's selling papers for the homeless person, and they may not be homeless. They may just be selling papers because they can't get another job. But it's learning about who they are as a person, not just seeing them as a person, who's selling a newspaper, or not just somebody who's panhandling. We don't know why they're panhandling, but what's their name? I try to ask people, even if I don't have any money to give them, I try to say, so what's your name? Hi, I'm Lily. What's your name? And looking at
as a human being.
Yeah, that each person has dignity, and we see Jesus in other people. So how is that person represent? How do we see Jesus? And I always like, one of the things I think about is how tangible, tangible, touchable thing. And since I wear glasses all the time, it's like, all right, give me new glasses, Jesus, so I can see how to live like you. How do you see this situation, or how do you see this person, and help me to have your sight versus having my blinders on, or my prejudice, or whatever that I bring to that person or situation. Because with Jesus, everyone is loved and everyone is beloved, and that's how that's what I want to keep living out, is how I see other people as beloved and as reflections of God. And it's harder with people that we totally disagree with, but it's like, how do I even love those people and bring shalom, pray for shalom in their life, even when I totally disagree with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and this reminds me, this talk reminds me that we're actually starting to get ready for one of my favorite conferences that actually in many ways is focused on some of the things that we're talking about, the Inhabit Conference here in Seattle at the end of April. And I will put the details of that in the comments.
It's such a good, I was so sad that I'm not going to be able to make it this year, but and especially because it's in person finally again.
Oh yeah, and the focus is on how do we, get to be known in our neighborhoods? How do we reach out in our neighborhoods? How do we see transformation in our neighborhoods? And it's just such a great conference for those that are struggling, with how do we really follow Jesus? How do we live that out in our neighborhoods these days? Not just kind of over there. It's important to be reaching out to the Ukrainian people, but it's just as important. And I think we need to put just as much emphasis on reaching out to our neighborhoods, not in an evangelism kind of way, but in a life kind of way.
In a loving way, right? Just bringing love and healing and wholeness. Yeah.
Well, and particularly at the moment when so many people are still feeling, and probably will for a long, long time, feeling the impact of coronavirus, and now, the increased petrol prices, the increased grocery prices. What can we do to help people? Is there somebody that we should take a bag of groceries to each week? Is there somebody that we should kind of slip some money for a petrol tank, a tank full of petrol each week? I'm sorry, it's petrol to me.
That's all right. It's gas. I knew what you were talking about. The gas station. Yes,
yeah.
That is a great gift card. That was, I was thinking, I have two people that I need to get we have Kroger, Kroger is our Safeway from the West Coast. And so they have gas, and they tend to have really good gas prices, but they also have groceries. So having a Kroger gift card to give to someone so they can get gas or groceries.
Yeah.
Whichever way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also was thinking about today's blog post, and I'm going to blank out on the woman who wrote it. You probably know her off the top of your head.
Emily Huff.
Her blog post about was so good today. So if you haven't read the blog post on God's Space Light, Keep Watch by Emily Huff. Yeah, and she's in Nashville. I need to meet her because she's a Nashville person who's moved, teaches at SPU.
Yes, at SPU. Yeah,
okay.
Here in Seattle Pacific University. She only writes occasionally on the blog, but whenever I see her name, I think, oh, wonderful, Emily's writing again. She's one of those people that just is so enriching in terms of her contributions to the.
Well, I just thought it was perfect for where we are. In terms of, she talks about, realizing it was like I did last week on that, it was the 2-year anniversary of the, everything shutting down here in America anyway. And then how instead of being hyper vigilant, but that Jesus invites us to keep watch with him and for him. And I love that, it's keeping watch. And I think it's also like holding space for people where they are, in whatever situation they're in. That's to me, that's a real practice of the kingdom, is how do we hold space for one another, and the compassion that kind of goes along for me with compassion practice, and how do we hold, you use Jesus's eyesight versus our own, when we're viewing all the stuff that's happening horrifically around the globe and in our neighborhoods too. And so I recommend that today. Read that post.
Well, and that does bring me back to just touching on my blog post last Monday, when I talked about the fact that Lent in the Northern Hemisphere, once upon a time, coincided with what was known as the hunger season. The time when the stored grain from last year was running out. And if last year had been a poor season, it might have run out. And this was the season where poor families in particular were most vulnerable to starvation. And, it's kind of like we're living in a hunger season now, and we need to look around and who are the ones whose supplies of grain, as it were, have run out, and who we can reach out to and help through this very difficult time of Lent, this hunger season, people near and far, because it's not just the Ukraine that is in need at the moment. There are so many other countries where people are in need too. And one of my fears is that everything is so focused on the Ukraine that these other countries are getting less as a result. And I think we need to make sure that we don't lessen what we give elsewhere in order to give to the Ukraine, because we do need to recognize that this is a hunger season for a lot of people in a lot of places. So anyway, we are at the end of our time here, Lily, but last words.
Last words. Well, I invite everybody to find some seeds. And what does Jesus need to plant in you this rest of the Lenten season? What is Jesus planting? And it might be something new. It might be replanting something that we were talking about needing bigger pots. Maybe you need a bigger pot so that you can grow more into kingdom living. So pick something that represents that new life and new growth, and that kingdom life to you, and live that out in the weeks ahead. And don't forget that Easter goes beyond Easter Sunday, and to be people of Easter.
It's exactly, we are meant to be people of Easter, even not just the 5 weeks of the year that is the Easter season, but all of the year. We are meant to live out the principles of Easter, of the life of the kingdom, of the life of Jesus. This is where our focus is not at the cross. I love Stations of the Cross, but if that's the only thing we do, then something is missing in our lives. And if that's the only thing we know about Jesus, something is definitely missing in our lives as well. And I really encourage people. I think that Mark Scandrett's book on
the Ninefold Path.
Yeah, the Ninefold Path. In fact, his earlier book too, Practicing the Way of Jesus.
Practicing the Way of Jesus is a wonderful book. It's great. Yes.
Another one. So there are 2 other resources that are very easy to read that I think we would highly recommend.
And they actually do. I mean, they're good friends of mine. And when I used to point out, people say, well, who's living it? Who's living? Yes. And who's living it out? They would be the people that I would say, these are the people who are really living out the kingdom in kind of the new world, beyond regular church land too.
Well, I hope you think we are too. So
I do. Oh yes, I do. I do. Yeah. Yes, you guys blazed the trail. That's what I told people at Wild Goose. It's like, okay, these guys have blazed the trail much longer than any of you guys have even thought about the trail. So in fact, I was thinking,
I was
thinking about
the way, but we're still, as much as we can,
you're still doing it and learning.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your dear husband, Tom, when we were talking about sharing things, and that Tom was the first person that I heard talk about how would we, as we got older, could we share with people who are younger in terms of housing, to have, like you guys do, have the apartment younger couples can live there in community. And how could we be more in sharing housing, since housing is so astronomically expensive, but helping as people, especially who are getting started in life together, singles or as married couples. And you guys still are practicing that. But Tom was the first person I ever heard talk about how we might share housing. And that was
interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Good point to end on then.
Yeah.
Well, blessings. And if people have comments, if you weren't able to watch it live, but you're going to watch it on Facebook later, you can still add comments on the Facebook page. If you're watching it on YouTube afterwards, we will be putting it up there, and you can still add comments there as well. And
we'll put the books in. We'll put the books below too. The links to the books that we talked about.
And we will try and put those in both places. So, blessings on everyone. Blessings on you, Lily, and thank you for this time.
Thank you, Christine. Have an awesome day. Love you. Tell
You
Tom
too.
hi.
Bye.
Bye-bye.